Remember how you loved the stories at bedtime about princesses and fairy godmothers? Well, you may want to hold on tighter to your teddy bear and keep that nightlight on, because these are not your mother's bedtime stories.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Not Your Mother's Bedtime Story. The gang's all here. This is Colleen.
Chrissy's here.
Sherry's here.
Karen the mom is here.
So we have a fun story tonight. If we were just reminiscing about the college homes that we lived in, or maybe home is overstated, we've all had some wacky or had some critters living with us, not spiritual, but otherwise. Chrissy had her bout with bats. Sherry had her bout with raccoons. But we have a guest here who has some supernatural presence involved in their college experience. So anyone want to chime in here?
Well, no, I was going to say, before we get going, and we record well in advance, and we've just finished Halloween in real time, but by the time you listen to this, you'll be in Christmas mode. And I was thinking about it because there's been so many new remakes and the new Exorcist. And I know you guys, some of you, I haven't seen it yet. I probably will wait until it is streaming, but
Mom and I went and saw it.
Yeah. And you guys said it was not as scary, but I had to think about that. I'm like, because my Graham, my son, likes horror movies too. And I'm like, what is the scariest horror movie that you've ever seen? And for me, it's The Exorcist. I don't think I will watch that one again. And that's why when the remake or the sequel came out, I'm like, no, I can't watch it, because when I was 12 years old, I think that's when I watched it. And I remember seeing her face. I'd go down to the basement and grab something, and I would run up the stairs. I mean, what kid doesn't do that anyway? When you turn off the lights and you run up the stairs, but I would always see her face behind me. And so I would just go up the stairs as fast as I could. And it just scared me. And that was, I think, the only horror movie that's done that to me. And I don't know, do you guys have a horror movie that affected you like that?
For me, it's The Exorcist too. I didn't watch it until, I think I was telling Mom about this. I didn't watch it until I was in high school, but I chose to watch it by myself. I think Mom and Dad were out of town, and it was just me and Reggie, who was our Jack Russell Terrier. I mean, he wasn't going to, he's not going to protect anything, but so it was just me and Reggie, and I decided, I was like, I'm going to watch The Exorcist. And why I did that, home all by myself. And that movie just, and you all know my son Kane is really into horror and scary movies, and that's the one movie I won't let him watch yet. I said, no, I'm like, you can't, it's just, there's too much in it, and there's just, I don't know what it is, but it's disturbing on so many different levels, and I can't let him watch it. I let him watch Halloween, and I let him watch, Scream and those types of movies, and Poltergeist. We watched Poltergeist when we were little kids, and that never really bothered me. But for some reason, The Exorcist, and the new Exorcist, definitely not of the same caliber as the original. I mean, no, it had some creepy bits in it. Right. It had
cheap thrills kind of things, but
cheap thrills, some jump screams and everything, but it wasn't anywhere near the original.
No, I don't think you can ever top the original. The Exorcist would probably be but the second one, and it's almost kind of an unseen thing, is The Changeling. Do you remember that movie with George C. Scott? And it was like, oh, when that wheelchair turns and comes at him, when it's empty, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's terrifying. I mean, it's almost, it's an unseen, you don't really see anything, but and The Haunting, the original one, it was black and white back in the 60s and stuff. That, like you said, you never really actually,
one too.
The Haunting, right? It had, it was just like, you see this door just heaving in, and it's like they never really show a ghost or anything, but it's all left to your imagination, which is which is
And she's like squeezing, you're squeezing my hand too tight. And it was like she wasn't even next to her.
was,
Like,
no, she was clear across the
like,
room. And it was,
what's
I know,
squeezing your hand?
there's so many good stories and stuff. But yeah, it's almost kind of like when it's left to your imagination, your mind, it's like, what is haunting this place? What is it? And it's, ugh.
Yeah, it's more of like a psychological thriller. That one is too, because you're trying to figure out what's going on with her, and is she crazy? And the house wants her. And,
Right.
I'm getting goosebumps, like even thinking about it. That is a good one. I'll have to put that one back on again. Well,
and the haunting, and
and the Changeling. I showed that one to Graham a couple of years ago, and he said it wasn't scary, but he enjoyed the story of it. He's like, it's a really good story. One versus the slasher films where they just come in with a chainsaw, and those are fun too in their own right. But yeah, I think there's something creepy and spooky about like a psychological thriller. So I don't know. What about you, Colleen?
I would say The Exorcist. I watched it when I was a teenager, and then they remade it for the theater probably like maybe 20 years ago. I remember going to the theater, watching it, and I remember even being afraid to go into the bathroom by myself because it was so terrifying. And then I saw the remake of The Exorcist a few weeks ago, and I agree, definitely was, not saying it's disappointing, but just wasn't as scary as the original for sure. Maybe it's just the thought that something like that could really, really, really happen, or was based on a true story, that makes it even more scary.
Yeah, I think that's the creepiest part. Like, give me a haunted house, give me, even a poltergeist, but when you start getting into possession and any of that kind of demons, yeah.
Well, didn't they I think when they remade it, because I don't remember in the original, like when she did the creepy walk backwards down the stairs, I don't remember that original, but I think they added scenes to it. I think when and there was more of like those creepy faces that would just appear, it's like all of a sudden it would be a scene, and just just like a weird creepy face would appear in there. Because I don't know if that's what you were seeing her face, Chrissy. You weren't seeing like a random demonic face appearing.
No, it was her face. Yeah, and she was so ugly, and I'm like, run as fast as you can. She's gonna get you. I don't know why. Like why she would be in the basement, but why do you run up the stairs when you turn the lights off? Everything's in the basement. Yeah. It's always scary.
Well, if we want to shift gears to the college house,
let's take a left here.
Chrissy, do you want to talk about your bats?
Well, let's let our guest tell her stories, and then we can pepper with our not so scary paranormal stories, but scary on another sense stories. So, yeah, go ahead and take it away, Kathleen.
Oh, okay. So I went to college in Plymouth, and I lived in a house that was built in 1820 for 2 years. And there, we actually won the phone number to the landlord by beating the boys who had lived in the house previous to us. They were graduating, and it was kind of a coveted house. Like a lot of kids wanted to live there because it was about a mile off campus. And so it was far enough away, that you were like away from campus and not bothered with some of the rules of campus, but it was close enough that you could easily ride your bike or walk, and people would still come to parties at your house because it was close enough. So it was somewhat coveted, and the landlord's phone number, you could only get it through the people who lived there previous to you. So we played indoor soccer. My roommates, or my friends, and I, we were still living in the dorms at the time, and we played the boys who had lived in the house, and they invited us back to their house afterward, and we played more soccer for the landlord's phone number. We won the game, but the soccer ball was like going into the wall and everything. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to live here and we're destroying this place. But anyways, so.
Wait, you played soccer inside?
Yeah, in the because it was, so you have to imagine it was like so it was old farmhouse, and it had one of those creepy dirt basements with the stone foundation. But yeah, so it had this, and then it had a big wraparound porch, farmer's porch, huge kitchen, And then, and this actually plays into the ghost story a little bit. Like, so it was a big kitchen. And then, from the kitchen, there was a doorway it connected to, we had a big barn, that was connected to the house. And then if you went the other way through the kitchen was the living room. And then it was another doorway. So it was like almost like one straight kind of way through the house. And then there was like a big stairway in the front, and there were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom downstairs, and then 3 bedrooms upstairs that were available to us. And then there was this 5th room that was locked with a padlock. And we broke into that 5th room. And even though it was in our lease, we to not open that, we did anyways. And we ended up adding another girl to live in the house, and she moved into that room. And I don't know, it would make the story so interesting if I could tell you that after we opened that room is when we had the appearance of the super, but I can't quite remember. So I don't.
If you watch enough horror movies, that is what did
Yes.
it. You unlocked the
Exactly.
locked room. Yeah,
Exactly.
released the Kraken,
And so anyway, so this is how the story goes. So we had been living in the house. We were so excited. We all move in. We've been living in the house for a couple of weeks, and I was in bed one night, and in the middle of the night, it got really, really cold in my room. And I thought maybe I left my window open. So I rolled over. And when I rolled over to like get out of my bed to go close my window, there was a woman standing next to my bed, and I could literally see through her. She was just like in a gown. She had no face. It was just dark, like, and long dark hair. Right. And she was just standing there. And I was so scared. I just rolled over and faced the wall and was like, and pulled the covers over my head and just like prayed, like, oh my God, please, she's going to go away. She's going to go away. So, she must have gone away, but so that happened. And I was so scared that I couldn't tell. I wouldn't talk about it with my roommates. That's how scared I was, because I felt that by telling the story, I was going to conjure her back, right? Or upset her or something, right? So I kept it to myself, and I'd be in the kitchen sometimes, and I'd feel this like cool breeze, like across my neck, the back of my neck. And then I don't know, like it wasn't that long that I had to keep it in. It was maybe like a week or 2. We had a bunch of people over at the house, and a lot of the people that were over at the house had lived in the house previously. And they had asked us, have you met the ghost? And we all got really quiet. And it turned out that I was not the only one who had had an experience. And then my roommate, Julie, she started to share that one day she was in the living room, just sitting on the couch reading. And we had those beads that hung down in the doorway, the wooden beads. And no one else was in the house when she was there. And the beads all of a sudden parted, like really abruptly. And she said it got really cold in the room. And then in the kitchen, she wouldn't get up because she was so scared. But in the kitchen, she heard the cabinets opening and closing and all the glasses being moved around, and I know. So she shares that, right? And then I share my story, and we're all just like standing there, and they're like, yeah, no big deal. She just shows up, and then just makes herself known, and then she'll quiet down. But so the other people who had been in the house identified that it was a female, had confirmed kind of like some of the things that we were wondering about. But my God, I didn't have any other encounters after that. And like I said, I lived in the house for 2 years. So we lived for our entire junior year and our entire senior year. The second year we lived there, we had male roommates as well as female roommates. I don't know. I think it was just too chaotic in the house when we did that our senior year. It was a really, really crazy time. So I almost wonder. And I will say this. We left that door locked my senior year. We didn't open it. It was only my junior year that we had opened
I have a
the
question
door
about
to
the
the
door to
extra
the extra
room.
room then. So you said that all these other people that were over at the party had previously lived in the house. Did they also open that room? So they did.
Nobody
did.
follows the
Yes.
rules.
Yeah, nobody follows the rule. I mean, what kind of padlock was this? Was this like one of those like that you had on the little diaries that you could just pull and like open? You didn't even need a key.
No, it was. So no, our friend. So there was there were 5 of us, right, that were moving in, and there were only like, there was the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were the 5 bedrooms, right? But one of the bedrooms was really small downstairs. So, we were like, oh, that kind of stinks. Her name was Janice that ended up moving into the big room. And she actually like never stayed at the house because she had a boyfriend and she was always with him. And so it was so rare that she was there. And we were individually out and about on campus sort of complaining about like, oh, shucks, like, like poor Janice got the short straw. Like we drew straws, and she ended up in the small room. And this guy who was a teacher's aide, he pulled me aside after class and was like, you just got to get a buck knife. And I was like, a what? And he said, if you get a knife and you get it in the padlock, it'll undo it. And I was like, okay. So we went back and we tried various knives actually. And there was that extra room actually extended over the living room and the kitchen. And we opened it up and it was just like mattresses, like all over the place. Honestly, it looked like people had like orgies in that room. I'm not kidding. It was, am I okay to say that? You might have to edit that one. I don't know. But anyways, so it just was like this strange room of just like bedding and like I don't know.
Kathleen,
and I think it's because the landlord was from
that. There, I mean, it just just a room of mattresses, and that's where your mind goes.
Well, but really, like, why would the landlord want to keep you out of a room full of mattresses? I'm glad you said it was in there because I'm thinking it's like, the feather and like the stick voodoo doll and like, the vial of blood.
So,
yeah.
Right. Bunch of doll heads. Yeah, exactly.
So was it like, where was this room? Like, was it by itself or was it by other rooms and it was the only one that, where was it in relation to everything else?
It was totally shut off from like the rest. So it was actually like at the end of our hallway, of the upstairs hallway. So picture a farmhouse, right? And at the end of the hallway was this locked door with this padlock on it. And then that room, so we opened that padlock and got into this room that it was huge. It was the length. Yeah. It was, like I said, it went over the living room and the kitchen.
Did anybody ever ask the landlord why it was locked?
No, we never asked the landlord because we didn't want to tell him that we got into it. No,
but I mean, like when you moved in, you didn't want to, like, hey, why is this room locked? Like,
I don't know. It was so weird. We were so naive, I guess. We were just excited. Like I said, this house was like it was like a really hot house to get, like as college students. And we were so pumped to get there and that we didn't even notice the extra room. So then there's also that room had its own stairway up and down. It had like a back stairway that was like kind of like closed in the wall. And then there was a little door in our living room that also had a padlock on it. So we noticed all of it as we were moving in, and we were kind of like, what is that? And then we thought maybe the landlord stored some of his things in that space, because maybe he came up in the summertime, we weren't sure. We didn't really have a relationship with him. It was literally sign the lease, make sure you don't have, you don't blow up a car on the property. And that actually was in our lease. I just remember that you can't
blow up a car. So that means that it happened before.
The boys that live, the boys who lived there before us, I guess they tried to do like a James Bond movie, and they had a zip line coming out of my bedroom window that went to there was like a detached garage like out in the middle of the yard, and so the zip line went from my bedroom window to the top of the the garage, and then we had a trampoline, and yeah, they blew up a Pontiac in the yard.
So he says, so the landlord says, no
So
blowing up of cars. Stay out of my red room of pain.
locked room. Yeah.
So do you think it was like a servant's quarters like back in the day if it had that back staircase?
Maybe because like it didn't really have she had like one small window in all of that space. It was like, you know how the older farmhouses will have that like cockeyed window off to the side that's like squeezed in between like where the eaves are of two different roofs. It was like that. She just had one little window in that room. So I don't think that the landlord used that room to like stay in. I think he used it for storage. But Janice, our roommate, she chose to move into that space over having the smaller room downstairs because it was like the smaller room was like on the main floor, and then we just had that room as an extra room. I know, and she was brave, I guess, to like stay in there, but like I said,
was there a lot of activity in that room? Like,
she
did she have experiences
she
in
didn't. So this is interesting. She did not share anything that night, nor did she. We would ask her and she would get really goosey. She didn't stay there a lot. Like I said, she ended up, I don't think she even stayed there into the next semester. She didn't live with us long, is what I'm saying. She ended up either completely moving in with her boyfriend. I know that she was at her boyfriend's all the time. We never even expected her around a lot of times because she was so invested in her relationship that she didn't really come around. But it does make you wonder, right? I mean, I feel like I should reach out to her and be like, did you have anything ever spooky? She wouldn't talk about it, but I think she, like the rest of us, didn't want to say anything because we were afraid. She was probably afraid she would conjure the spirit back, if she did have any activity.
And you'd mentioned that the boys that had lived there before had experiences. Did anyone know maybe like what the origin story might have been with this woman? The origin?
No, nobody. No.
Orgy or origin story.
Orgy story.
Oh my gosh. And just to be clear, when I lived in the house, that room was never used in that way. Okay. So, but no, you know what? And it's so funny. Like, I feel like everybody was really scared of the whole idea of it all. Like we talked about it and everybody was like, I can remember us all huddled in the kitchen sharing our stories and just kind of being like, all right, we're all set. We're not going to talk like we're not going to talk about this again because it was so scary to us that this was really happening. And I think once we got confirmation from people that had lived there before us that it was a female ghost and that was that and that she just kind of shows up and then goes away, it was like, okay, all right. Okay, so maybe we're done and it's okay. I think we just sort of accepted it. But you're right. Like, who lived in that house in 1820 and like what happened? Was it a terrible death, of this woman? Was she murdered or
what was your sense when she was in your room? Did you feel like she was mad at you, or I mean obviously you were scared, but I mean people talk about what sense they feel.
Yeah, I just felt her presence, like almost like I'm here. And she just stood, and it was just kind of like, I'm here. To be honest, at first, my first feeling that washed over me was like I feel like my grandma, has always watched out for me. And my first feeling was kind of like grandma, but it wasn't, it was definitely a younger woman, but it was not, so it wasn't a feeling of, there wasn't any malicious intent or anything like that. It was just a feeling of presence. So I think, I wonder too, because she didn't, she did show herself to the boys that lived there before us, but we were all women in the house, at that time. I don't know if like maybe she did have some sort of terrible death, like at the hands of, an abusive spouse, or that was her comfort.
Maybe she was just curious and she was just checking it out and seeing. I mean, it seemed, she's coming through what the hell are these beads? Fling them in.
Goddamn hippies.
Checking your cabinet. She's like,
do
do you guys really need all these shot glasses? Come on, ladies, let's go.
Exactly.
Well, you think about it, like
plastic wine glasses?
I mean, you think about it, if you're gonna haunt a place, like a college house would be really interesting for a ghost. I mean, think of all the turnover. Every couple of years, you've got all new kids.
She's probably like, these girls are lame. The last guys had zip lines and growing up Pontiacs. Like, what?
Although they did figure out how to break open the lock on the room.
Right.
This is true. This is so true. I know.
So that's my other question. So did you put a lock back on it before you moved out, or did you just leave it open? Oh, you did? So you were like...
It was clearly used.
Nothing to see here. We weren't in it.
It was open. It was, obviously, like, if you put a knife in something like that, it's all damaged and stripped. And we just like closed it back up when we were all done. And we were like, oh, we don't know. That's the thing. Like, I feel like back then people didn't really, I don't know. We were just kind of like, all right, okay. And then, like I said, the following year, we didn't open that extra room at all.
And you said that there was stairs leading down, and then the stairs led to the tiny door in the living room, or you do?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I have a thing with tiny doors. Like when we were looking to buy a house before, it was like, the house had a tiny door in it, I was like, no, I don't like it. Like, they just creep me out. Like, I just imagine little leprechauns coming out and just, like, there was one house and it had a tiny door, like on a loft in the master bedroom. I'm like, leprechaun's going to come out of there and he's just going to dangle his little creepy feet watching me sleep. Like, it's like, that's how my mind works. I don't know. Can't stand the tiny doors. Like, it's like,
no, I'm with you on the tiny doors. To me, I think of children who were put in the, like, hidden in that, in that little space. And then I think of their ghosts, child ghosts. That scares me deeply. So we had a tiny door in our living room in that house.
But that's what's like weird. Like, why would it lead to a tiny door? Like, that makes no sense. I mean, if it was like servants' quarters and you're going down the stairs, so it's like, is it like Alice in Wonderland? Like, do they get smaller as they go down the stairs and then they have to go up?
I don't know.
Well, people were smaller back then. Maybe it was like a dwarf servant. It was a dwarf servant.
No, I had the same thought. What? Janice did use the tiny door, and she'd like come flying into the living room sometimes.
What?
She would.
You unlocked the tiny door?
Yeah, that was that.
So what? Janice would just come rolling down the stairs and like out the tiny door?
Oh, you know I would if I had that. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, she loved it. That was great because we never knew when she was there, So she'd just like come flying out.
Rolling, hey guys.
Yeah.
Well, Kathleen, how big was it? Do you think, like, dimension?
It wasn't like so tiny. It was probably like 4 feet tall. It wasn't like one of those like teeny tiny doors.
Weird.
Yeah, it was.
That's weird though. Come on. Nobody is 4 foot.
Well, come on, I picture like Tyrion Lannister like coming down like, your food, my lady.
So do you think do you know if students still live in this house today?
They don't live in the house anymore. They sold the house. The house was sold in 2016 was the last time it was sold. And it is all it's repainted and there's new flooring and it's all refurbished.
Before we started recording, we were chatting about college houses and their general states of disrepair and what college students actually live in and think it's okay. But Sherry, you want to talk about your house?
Yeah, so I lived similar to Kathleen. I lived in this house junior and senior year, and I was in a sorority, and so it was all girls from the sorority that moved into this house, and everybody had called it like our annex sorority house because there were so many of us that lived there. There was 13 girls that lived there at one point. And so the house was old. It was built in 1900, and it was, I think they actually marked it as a historical landmark Illinois State University. So this is in Normal, Illinois. And so this house, it had bedrooms, it had a basement, it had a main level, and it had an upstairs, and we had bedrooms on every level. But the basement sounded similar to Kathleen's, where the side that didn't have the bedrooms on it was more of a bare basic. I mean, I think I recall, like, yeah, dirt being down there, but it had like weird sections where there were mattresses. I don't think there was any orgies going on in there. That would be really nasty if there were, because it was gross down there. But it had just like kind of cut off, and then our laundry was down there, so we had to go down there all the time. But there was big old rat traps and, you know, things down there, so pretty gross. But what we didn't have ghost infestations. Well, we might have, but we didn't really. I think we overpowered them if there were any. But what we did have infestations of was raccoons or trash pandas, and so the house was in various states of disrepair. One of them is that screens didn't really fit on your windows. So I lived on the 3rd floor, so up at the very top, but like our roof was such that you could go out my window and be on the roof. And, you know, so one night I'm working on a paper and I'm sitting at my computer desk watching, and then I catch out of the corner of my eye something in my window, and I did a double take and I look over, and there's a little face in my window with little paws up. And I swear, if that thing had pushed just a little bit harder, I would have had a raccoon in my bedroom, because that screen was not on my window. And I screamed, and my roommates come running in and then we also had a mama raccoon that had babies. So our porch overhang had a big old hole in it. So she decided to make her nest in there. We had a porch swing out on our porch. We'd be sitting out on the porch swing and we'd hear it. I don't know if you've ever heard a raccoon hiss, but that mama would get angry when we're sitting out there on our porch swing, and she would just be hissing at us. So this was my one roommate had a room next to me, and she said she heard the worst scream that she's ever heard. She looks out her window, and that mama raccoon is killing a squirrel and taking the squirrel to her nest. And didn't know raccoons killed squirrels, but this one did. Last raccoon story. So on the bottom level, we had like a back porch. So it was closed off, and that's where the roommates, we would put like their trash, like they're waiting to take it out to the dumpster. And one night, my roommates are like, "Oh, you know, we've got a raccoon out there." I'm like, it's stuck on the porch. We need to get it out. We need to call animal control. So I go out there, and this is the scene. So I walk out the door, and, you know, we're college, so there's pizza. So there was a box of pizza. The box is open. There's pieces of pizza in there. One piece of pizza is pulled out of the box. It's got little nibbles out of it. So there's the eaten piece of pizza. A few feet after that is a pile of throw up. And a few feet after that is this little raccoon huddled in the corner, like, "Oh, I shouldn't have eaten that pizza." Damn. And so it's like, this poor thing is like completely like, yeah, that's what it looked like. And so we had to call, we had animal control on speed dial because we had so many raccoons. But yeah, so they had to come out, and he's like, "Well, I can't really do anything." I was like, you can get it off of our porch. And so they were not helpful. So we ended up like opening up part of the door and just like hoping that it would, and it eventually went out. But it was our stories with
called the health department. It's like, they got bad pizza there. What was I eating?
Think of like the great outdoors, you know, like they're going through the trash with their little delicate fingers.
Oh, you got to try this.
It tastes like burnt mango.
And hair.
Well, we didn't have raccoons. We had bats. So I was just looking. The house that I lived in was actually, it was a track and cross country house. So Kathleen, you talked about like, you know, getting the indoor soccer player's house, and it was the same thing. You had to kind of get willed this house from the upperclassmen, and we, you know, inherited the track and cross country house. And I went to school in Iowa City, University of Iowa, go Hawks. And it was a house that's, you know, kind of in the popular student row. And so it was ideal location, but built in 1900, had 5 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. So that's a horror story in itself. You know, we would do tag team showers. Colleen and her husband Bill, when they stayed with us, were quite amused to watch how we would bargain who could take the shortest shower, and they would go first. And we would just leave the shower running because we all had like 8:30 class, and just let the shower go and run out in our towels. And then the next one would be like, go. And then the next one would go. And I mean, that's how you showered 5 girls in the morning. But yeah, nothing paranormal ever happened there. I think, again, it must be something with just, there's too much going on. There's just too much, other business for anything paranormal to really want to manifest. But yeah, for our house, the bats were the worst. We must have been in like the migration pattern of these bats in the, late summer, when we're all just kind of getting to school. And as soon as it would get dark out, I mean, they would come up. I still remember the poor person I was on the phone with one time and walked in from the hallway into the living room and turned the light on, and they would come up from the basement because that was where they got in again.
My
all these bad basements. And one flooped up from the basement, hit the back of my head, and kept going into the room. And I screamed bloody murder on the phone. I mean, it was just awful. We would go and we would sleep with like bike helmets on, and we would have like our tennis rackets, and we would walk around because we were so scared. But the worst was, it was Labor Day weekend, and I was the only one that was going to be staying there. And I was working, I think, and I came home, and there was a note on the door of our only one bathroom that said, "Do not enter, bat inside." I'm like, oh, you guys. So they left the one bathroom with the bat in there. And I got home, and it's like getting dusk. So I know this thing is about ready to wake up. And so I call my 2 friends down the street, these huge football player guys, former football players. I'm like, hey, can you guys get this bat out for me? And I mean, it was like a Laurel and Hardy skit to watch these 2 large guys taking like a blanket to try to get it out of the window. And then they're so large, like the 2 of them are like trying to move sideways and like get through the door. And they finally get the bat out. And I think they might have been just as scared as me of it, but it was awful. And our landlord was we had talked to him about it, and he didn't care. But then a reporter came to the house, and she somehow knew that this was like a common thing, that all these houses were bat infested. And so there's a picture of one of the roommates like peering into the basement on the front of like the local paper. And he was like a state senator or House of Representatives, and got livid and was so mad that we had talked to the paper, told him about this. I'm like, hey, you need to do something about this. And I don't think they ever did. I think it was kind of just where it was starting to get cold and they weren't migrating anymore. But yeah, the bats, the bats, they were the scariest part of that house. And we had squirrels too. And we had them up in the attic. You could hear them running. I think we even named them. I can't remember now what we named them, but then he had a girlfriend. And one day we finally, the basement was for us to use the laundry room. The attic was like not really off limits, but the squirrel had a girlfriend. She could hear them because you could hear 2 sets of little foot patters in the morning. You'd lay there, and we finally went up, and one of the other roommates and I were like, we're going to go up to the attic and we're going to see these guys. And sure enough, like, we look up and these 2 little faces peek up from behind the box. And again, you're like, ee! And we ran downstairs. But we talked about like squatters too. And she wasn't there when I was there. I was already gone, and I had subletted my room out. But one of the track girls needed like a room for a month. And so she pitched a tent in the attic and was sleeping up there with the squirrels and the bats. It's like what you do when you're desperate as a college student to live somewhere. And I don't know how Maria survived up there, but great memories. But at the same time, we're like, this is the horror story that we live in when you're in college. And
yeah, I also one of the houses I lived in college was squirrel infested. I remember I could hear them. I had like an outside storage, or it wasn't outside, it was in the hallway. There was like a separate storage closet, but they definitely lived above there. And every time you went to get something in or out of that storage closet, you hear the little pitter patter of the little squirrels that would run across the roof. It was such a cutest little apartment, but geez, I do remember the squirrels in that house too.
Well, thank you, Kathleen, for letting us take a walk down our own college memory lane there. That was like bringing it all up. That was a great little story. And again, like it's nice, I think, when you're only, that you're going to be there temporarily. This is not a house that you've bought. This is not something you're invested in. And while it's still creepy, at least you can get out of it easily, or more easy, or I guess easier than if you're owning a home. So yeah.
Well, thanks. I have more questions about it anyway, now that we talked about it,
Yeah, somebody who actually stayed, if that room was the cause of it, or if it was just in general, that house. But it would be interesting. I mean, if there were any
History.
incidents, or what was the history of it, if there was anything.
It would be very interesting to find that out.
So I guess one more question for you, Kathleen, because this is something we've heard from other folks that we've had on the podcast. So since you've had that experience, have you felt what you felt there again, or have you felt that you are more sensitive to, or when you walk into a place, do you get any feelings that maybe you didn't have? Like since you've had this experience, has it seemed to open you up
I
more
think
to
so,
others?
but I think I'm a scaredy goose. Like, I think I'm just, so I think I feel things, you know what I mean? I do think that I am more open to that there's more to it than what we see.
Yeah, it's almost like you're marked or something. It's like once you have an experience, you're marked for it or something, I don't know. It just seems to be a common, seems to be a common thing that we hear, is that once it happens, it's like, oh, I never thought about it before, but then since it's like I get feelings, or I feel different things, or
I also feel like
I
was at a party. This was years ago. And a couple, we were talking about Osceola, Mount Osceola in New Hampshire here. It's a great hike. And we were talking about that hike. And they were sharing with me, they had asked me if I had ever seen the ghost on the trail on Osceola. And they had shared with me that they were followed by her. She was a pioneer woman, kind of following them up the trail. I have the chills just telling the story. But I felt like when they were telling the story, I could really feel it and visualize it, to the point where, like, I drove home. I probably flew home at like 60 miles per hour that night, thinking I was going to see that woman on the side of the road. I could picture her so clearly. And I had hiked that mountain. When they were telling me about it, I felt very connected to their story, So I've had things like that happen to me. I feel that, I get, my hair will stand up. I get the chills, and.
Well, thank you again so much for telling your story. And I guess if nobody has anything else, take it away, Mom.
Thank you for listening. And remember to keep that night light on. Good night, sweet dreams.
If you have a story to share, please send it to notyourmothersbedtimestory@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at notyourmothersbedtimestory. And please help us grow by following us on your favorite podcast platform, leaving us a positive review, and telling a friend. Thank you for your support.